Final Fantasy XIV's Rebirth is a story of legends at this point, and with its continued success and more players jumping into this amazing game, you all asked me, what if Final Fantasy XIV didn't have its rebirth? What would the world look like if the past was our present? And as your thought experiment guide, let's take a moment to ponder.
Time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibilities, where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the ones that you know. I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
Let me be very clear, this video is for entertainment purposes, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't love to know your thoughts on the subject. In this video, we're going to take a hard look at the impact of this question and what our world would look like today if Yoshi P didn't rebuild 14, but it tried to fix 1.0 instead and build upon that as its core game. Now, it's been 11 years since 14 was released and failed, and a new unknown name took over the project. Yoshi P first introduced himself to the gaming community on January 1st, 2011, and started his work to rebuild the game. But it wasn't just the game that needed to be rebuilt. It was the trust that gamers had in Square Enix. It wasn't, after all 14's fault, but a series of decisions and disappointments with the Final Fantasy franchise that all led up to a disastrous launch of 14, which, as stated by Square Enix, damaged the company so greatly and the Final Fantasy brand so deeply that they had no other choice but to rebuild the game. Final Fantasy XIV started out as a sandbox MMORPG that it didn't know what it wanted to be or it needed to be. Shortly after, it found itself lost adrift with countless issues, zones that didn't make any sense, and strains on hardware that would require high-end PCs just to run it. Over the course of time since Yoshi P took over the reins, the game was supported, improved upon, content was added, 8-man dungeons were added, the job system all came to be within the game and the world, and even people would later praise patch 1.23 as a good place for the game to be. Markets that could actually be searched would be added to the game, and overall, players were pretty happy. But they were happy because they felt the game had a future, because Yoshi P showed us that future. So first things first, the biggest change you would see is Yoshi P would actually still have shown us a future for 2.0, but it would have existed within the current framework that Final Fantasy XIV took place. Square Enix would have to announce that 14 would no longer be released on PS3 due to the requirements needed to run 1.0 and the development constraints within. A big part of what kept players playing was this vision that Yoshi P would detail out a new vision for the future of 1.0 with the primals, with the Empire. But with Final Fantasy XIV 2.0, it would not look like it does today, nor would Heavensward. Being that A Realm Reborn wouldn't be telling a focused story, but in more of a sandbox story, you would see within 2.0 players actually stepping into Ishgard for the first time, being that the location was teased for so long, and over time the player base would actually grow. 2.0 would come and go, and Square Enix would still struggle to this day, with the stock price dangerously low to being acquired. More than anything else outside of Final Fantasy XIV is actually really where this story would be taking place. Over the course of 11 years, Square Enix actually has changed and evolved, and that changes were brought about by Yoshi P, and he has actually implemented those not on his own division, but at the company as a whole. So in this timeline, Final Fantasy XV's development would still continue to struggle until it was finally released in an even more rushed state than usual in 2015, a year before it was released in our timeline. Its reception would be very, very poor. Articles would be written about the death of this one great franchise, and Square Enix would need to pivot hard and fast to try and restore order. In order to achieve this, even more resources would be taken away from the 14 development team, and an all hands on deck for what would be thought of as internally as perhaps the final Final Fantasy, if it wasn't successful, would begin. With Yoshi P's trust and leadership having had a positive impact on 14, it would be a while before any 3.0 work would be done, so Yoshi P would actually be put in charge to lead this team and try to save the Final Fantasy series as a whole. And he would begin his work and implement a plan of remakes, remasters, and the goal to drum up lots of nostalgia for the past while at the same time working on his vision for Final Fantasy XVI. In order to stave off any form of hostile takeover, both with investors very angry and other companies interested in the IP holdings of Square Enix, they would be forced to sell off Eidos Crystal Dynamics to Microsoft, who would then also be looking to acquire the company as well, but for the time being would be fine and have even more offerings to help them battle against the offerings of Sony at the time. And due to this change, you would see games like Marvel Avengers be shopped out to other shops like EA, Ubisoft, and Activision. In the end, Final Fantasy XVI would be released in late 2019 to critical acclaim, and Yoshi P would be heralded as the savior of both 14 and the series as a whole. But overall, 14 would not be the juggernaut that it is today. With the collapse of WoW and Blizzard, many players would be seeking a new MMO, but they wouldn't find 14 a very welcoming experience. It'd be a very difficult, very different game than they've previously been expected and accustomed to. With 16 helping write the company, Square Enix would start making plans for a new version, a reborn version of Final Fantasy XIV, a plan to help take advantage of new emerging technologies with Yoshi P at the helm, and it would be revealed that Yoshi P's plan for the future of 14 was originally presented to Square Enix, who chose to reject it due to its cost and limited time to develop the game, stating, "Nothing like this has ever been done before." And with that, our story comes to a close. What do you think would happen? What different choices would be made? Are you happy with the way things turned out? Or do you hope for something different in the future? Sound off below and let me know what you guys think, and also what if topics would you like me to cover in future videos. That's it for now. This has been Brian for Ginger Prime. Thanks for your time, your attention. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I honestly wish you a fantastic day. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Friendly, fun, and optimistic community, baby. Coming from an MMO community filled with toxicity, this is an amazing breath of fresh air. Keep it up, baby. Oh, yeah. I just want to say I'm really glad you're feeling